Tahoe, right on the east shore of the lake on, US 50. And it goes through a tunnel down the state line where all the casinos are. And I was working at the Gold Nugget Casino at night and running a crane, probably 2, 3, 4 days a week for the Nevada Generator Systems. They had in the paper that, I guess the guy's name was Clark. He was going to try to run a jet boat at 500, 600, whatever miles per hour he could get out of it. And Lake Tahoe's real nice and flat. I mean, it looks like glass. And a buddy of mine, Mike, and I, we went down to Manny's Cave Rock, which is on the other side, the south side of the tunnel. We walked in and we asked Manny and Pat if we could go up on top of the rock. And they said, no problem. So Mike and I climbed to the top, and Mike had told Manny and Pat, come on up with us. And they said, well, we got stuff to do. We'll be up there in a little while if we can. Well, we got to the top, and we heard them start to come up the trail. And I was sitting there drinking a beer. I was 21 at the time, so it was legal. And the guy had ran one run. And I mean, when he went across that lake, he was scooting. They wanted to see it. Of course, Wild World of Sports and a bunch of TV cameras were down by the lake, and we had a cut. We couldn't really see to the north, but down to the south we could see. Manny and Pat got to the top, and Mike and I both looked over our shoulders, and behind Manny and Pat, there was this huge monster. I mean, it was back there probably 60, 70 feet. We looked at each other, and it was gone when we looked back. And Manny and Pat looked at us and like, what the hell's wrong with you guys? And we both, no, nothing. We're just watching the boat. Mike and I never said a word. We just looked at each other, and even after we left, after the boat exploded, the boat hit on the second run or third run, the boat hit a stick in the water and blew up. And we were like freaking out, so we all went down the hill. Swank and I went back to the marina and told them that the guy had hit a log or a stick or whatever, because we could see it from our vantage point. Well, we never said anything, and we just went on about our business. Now, my girlfriend at the time, she'd taken off. She got married to some guy in the Air Force, some captain or whatever. And I didn't have a ride to work every night. And I would call Pat. I used to walk because it was only about 3 miles. And I would call Pat or Manny if I couldn't get a ride from where I was at. And I wasn't going to walk that way anymore. And I always got a ride to work. But I would run down there. We kept the crane at the Safeway. I'd go down there and fire that thing up, but I couldn't drive it back as my personal vehicle. But that's the first one.
And this is 1980. Can you kind of describe for the audience what you saw?
It was, well, when we look back over our shoulders, there's a huge rock that on me, it came up to just above my crotch. This thing was standing back behind there, and its knees, we couldn't see its knees. And we looked at it, and its arms were kind of down at its side, and then it started to raise its arms. And that's when we looked at each other. I mean, its face was like expressionless. It didn't look like a monkey. I mean, it looked like a huge, hairy person. And I mean, the muscles. I'm 6'6", and I had been out of the Marine Corps for about a year. And I was pretty well ripped, and not too many people would take me on. Same thing with Swank. Swank was a biker. He was probably 6'3". But this thing, I walked behind that rock, and he just, looked at me, and he shook his head. Swank never said anything. He just shook his head and walked on down the hill. And I never bothered looking. I didn't want to go follow what the hell this thing was. Never asked anybody, never made a comment, just stored it away and wanted to forget it. That was it. It was able to move so quick And we just turned our heads to look at each other, looked back, and it was gone. That was it.
Did you and your friend ever talk about it?
No, we never said, no, never. I mean, we used to go up to Kings Beach. We'd go to Auburn. We'd go to Sacramento. And I'd have to go down there and drop the boom truck off, not a crane, but drop it off, and we would do hospitals and things like that. And he would pick me up and act as my oiler and come back to Tahoe, or we'd stay in Kings Beach. We never said a word about it.
And how many years later was your second incident?
That was, it was probably 86. I was back here in Indiana, and we were doing a Otis elevator over in Bloomington. Had shut down for, I think, 2 weeks. And we were doing 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And what my job was to change out the crane rails that were in the loading bay. And I had a little 10-ton crane in there. My cousin was getting married in Columbus, which is about 50 miles away from Otis Elevator. And I made it out with Jack Neely for him to take over for me so I can go to the wedding and then scoot back as quick as possible so that we didn't lose any hours to somebody else. So I got off at midnight. And I jumped in the van and started coming across 46, which goes to a little town called Nashville. And there's this, probably the largest state park in Indiana, Brown County State Park. And we'd always had, picnics and parties and go fishing and things like that. There's a great place. As I'm coming up to the entrance, Brown County State Park, I see a guy doing jumping jacks in the middle of the road. I mean, I'm like, what the hell is this dude doing? And so I slowed down. He was trying to get me to stop. And when I stopped, I always carried a Mossberg Persuader and a Ruger 1022 with me. And I figured maybe this guy's trying to set me up. I've heard about that before. So I just pulled out the Ruger 1022. And I didn't unlock the passenger door. And he's going, let me in, let me in. I get out. And he's going, there's something up on the hill. Now, 46 is a 2-lane highway, but it has wide berms. So it could actually probably be a slow-moving 4-lane. But then on the north side, there's this huge ditch, and then this hill that goes up probably 15, 18 feet. And it's all a rock face. It's where they probably blasted away to remove for the roadbed and for proper drainage. And something was up there making one hell of a bunch of noise. And this dude said, that thing's been following me. I don't know what it is. It's throwing rocks. Right about then, here comes a slab. You know what sandstone is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what came down, and it hit and scooted across the road. And I was like, what in the hell is that? And I'm looking, and I don't see anything. And I said, dude, let's just get, and then it started going off, making all kind of crazy-ass noises. And I just jumped in, unlocked the door, and I had a 360 in this van, and I stomped on the gas. We got the hell out of there, and I'm looking in the rear view, and there's something in the middle of the road. Now, I'm probably about 200 yards away from it by this time. But, I mean, it's still in the road, and it looked pissed. But it looked big, too.
What kind of noises was it making?
It was making, you've heard mountain lions, right? You know,
yeah.
It was doing something like that, only it was lower. It was rattling the trees. There's a whole lot of trees up there. It was making all kinds of noise, and it was intimidating this dude. He'd been working downtown Nashville, and what he was going to do is just walk the back roads by the fairgrounds, and then he was going to go up over the hill to where the hotel was. But he wasn't familiar with the area. He walked past that and came out all the way to the Brown County State Park, and there's a little road right there. And he was like, took him a long time. He could have probably got a ride a lot earlier if he would have known the path. But he said after he passed that one road, that's where this thing picked up on. and it just paralleled him and followed him all the way out to the road, staying back in the trees. And there's a couple cabins back up there. And I guess there was nobody in them, but he said he was scared really bad. And it was so bad when we started driving away, I smelled something. And I looked at him and he goes, I shit my pants. And I carried basketball stuff with me. I had sweatpants and shorts and stuff. And we went up to the store up by the KOA campground. And he went in and changed his clothes. And I took him all the way back to Greensburg. I mean, I didn't get back to Columbus till about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Did he ever say what he thought it was?
No. I never even asked the dude his name. And he didn't ask me his. All I said was, what is that smell? And then I gave him some clothes, and I was like, take that crap off, put it in the bag. And, I said, I'll take you home. We never talked about it. It was the same thing as the first one. I wasn't going to say anything. I'm a crane operator. If I say something like that, they're going to be drug testing me.
I wanted to ask you, as you were driving off and you see this thing in your rearview mirror, was it on 2 legs or was it on 4, or could you tell?
It was standing up. Oh, I could tell, no problem. And it never popped into my head that this was the same thing that I saw before. Since then, I've been thinking back and trying to remember, and I'm like, I think it's probably the same species or whatever, but, it's a great big river monkey.
And then you had a third encounter. How many years later was this third one?
About 5 weeks ago.
And if you would, just walk us right into it. What happened in that encounter?
Well, I was standing right behind the house, and I had the puppy and Jack out here, letting them do their business, and all of a sudden, back in the woods, about, probably 350, 400 yards away from where I'm standing, I heard coyotes going like crazy. Well, I've heard that before, and they're taking a deer down. So I throw the dogs back in the house, get in the office, grab me a shotgun, put 5 rounds in the tube and 2 in my pocket, and I started huffing back there. And I went around to the back side of the lake, and I was going to cross the creek. It was too overgrown, and I hadn't been back there since spring. And so I followed the creek down to the culvert, and across the culvert, there's a big opening up there. It's probably, 150 foot from the culvert to the first tree, maybe a little bit further. But it's probably 75, 80 foot across. And it's pretty well open. There's a little bit of volunteer trees. But when I got in there, I didn't hear the coyotes anymore. And I figured they got the deer down and they're chowing on it. And so I started, sneaking back there. And I passed this one tree that's like a big fir or a cedar tree, but the limbs go all the way to the ground. And so you can't really see what's behind it. And there's this little opening, probably 40, 50 foot by 30 foot. And then there's another stand of trees, and then some big brush on the right-hand side, and then the forest on the left. And I got up there, and I'm right in the middle of it. And I'm looking at this tree in front of me, and I'm like, where's the damn coyotes? And all of a sudden, I hear a deer snort. Deer snorts, they're, pretty common. Then I heard a deer snort to my right. And I'm like, what is... And then they started going back and forth. And it started to sound like an engine going back and forth. And I'm like, what in the heck's going on? And then I realized something is moving to my left flank. And I start looking that way, and I point the shotgun towards that way. And then there's a snort over there, and those two stop. And then they start snorting like crazy, and I can hear something moving through the bush off to my right flank. And I'm like, I don't like this. And I heard whatever it was got all the way behind me. And he's behind that tree. That's when I popped around it. And that's when they started doing the big time snorting back and forth and then making other little noises. And I'm like, I've never heard this before. I'm starting to freak out. And so I just yelled out, I'm getting out of here, because I thought it was maybe somebody playing with me. But by that time, it's pretty much dark. The sky is still a little bit blue, but I can't see anything in the woods. And so I back out, and I keep fanning a shotgun around. And whatever was behind me followed me to the west as all the way as I went out. And when I crossed over the culvert, I was probably 50 foot past the culvert. Whatever it was, either jumped or stepped across that creek and broke a huge branch. And I made a phone call. I called my aunt and I said, get the 30-06 out. I'm coming up there. I'm coming back down here to see what this is. And as I'm on the phone, one of the rocks that we use back on the dam, which is a big, 2.5-pound rock, it comes flying over my head. And I'm like, oh, shit. And that's what I said to my aunt. And she says, what did you say to me? And I says, a rock just flew over my head. I said, I got to go. And I hightailed it back up to the house, and I went in to talk to them. In the meantime, I called my son, and he says, coyotes, they eat coyotes. And I'm like, why would they eat coyotes? They probably taste like dog. And but he explained it to me, and I was like, okay. So I settled down, and I came back to my house, and I'm covered with furs. I mean, I look like I'm in a ghillie suit. I'm like, Jiminy Christmas. And Luke calls me back and says, why don't you go down to the lake, take the spotlight, go down to the lake and sit on the dock and just listen and see if you can hear anything going across in the woods. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So I stepped out on the back porch, and I had a K-bar with me, no weapon. And I had my little spotlight. And as I was standing on the porch, I lit a cigarette, and on the side of our house, it was like something had smacked the crap out of one of the big trees. I've got 3 big trees over there. And I mean, it made a crack, not quite as loud as a rifle going off, but it was loud enough that it startled me. And I ran around the corner real quick to see what it was, and I'm shining the spotlight, and I'm shining it up in the tree, and I'm like, what the hell's, there's no wind. What is that? And I called my aunt, and I said, turn on the security lights. And it's just light up like a fortress. And so she went and lit it up, and I walked back to the shotgun. And as she turned the lights on, something ran between the houses, down the swale, and then back out towards this. I have a burn pile back here. And I got that shotgun, and I put double-aught buckshot and then slugs. And then I put 2 slugs in my pocket. And I put one in the pipe. And I started walking back out here, shining and spotting. And I'm looking, and I start hearing clicking. Like, can you hear that?
Yeah, like, are you talking about like tongue pops?
Yeah. Tongue clicking. And I'm like, what in the hell is this? And I'm not quite to the back of the barn, but I'm hearing this, and I can't see anything. Whatever it is behind the pile. And then I hear down by the edge of the pond, I hear like a bird call, and I'm like, it's night, whatever that is. And then I heard a second one over by Johnson's farm. And I'm like, uh-oh, whatever it is, they're converging. And then Luke calls up, and I tell him what's going on. And he says, get the hell out of there, just get to the house. So I just retreated back to the house, and I unloaded the weapon, and I locked the doors. Well, about then, somebody to the west of us, we got a subdivision probably a quarter mile to the west. Somebody starts shooting. Now, by this time, it's completely black outside, completely dark. And whoever's shooting is shooting a lot. My uncle calls me up and says, are you shooting? And I said, no. And I said, I think it's over at Blackout. He says, go over and check it out. So I get in the van and I drive over there. By then, there was 2 cops, and one of them was pulling out. The other one had a pistol in his hand, and he's talking to a guy. And the guy is pointing back to the woods, and I'm like, oh, hold on. I'm not going to stop and talk to the cop. I got the shotgun in the car. So I went around, came back, and Luke says, on Sunday, the next day, go out in the woods and see what you can see. I'm like, all right, I'm going to take the 30-06. Well, the next day, about 11 o'clock, I got out there, and it just felt normal. And I went all the way to the west end of the property, about 400 or 500 yards. And there wasn't really anything. It was right back behind Black Oak. And I went all the way to the east end, just back to where I had originally had this weird-ass encounter. And there were parts and pieces of coyote. There's about 3 skulls, I should say heads. And then there were the front part, and it was like they had been torn, pulled apart. And I was like, whatever it was, I don't want to meet it. And I swung back around and I went over by Morales' house, which is half a mile away. And I started coming back, and I mean, it was so thick that, I had a hard time getting back over here, but I eventually did. And I was like, there's nothing there, nothing but that ripped up coyotes. But when I got back here, one of my neighbors, I was talking to Johnson. Johnson said 2 fences were tore down over Black Oak, and 2 dogs were missing. That's pretty much the end of that.
What part of the country are you in, Eric?
I'm in Columbus, Indiana. I mean, I'm right next to. I'm just south of 46. We've got. It's probably close to 3/4, maybe more, of woods that are 400 foot or 400 yards thick, and it goes pretty much from 350 all the way to the cut through for the Turtle Bay edition.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to the neighbor?
No, I talked to one of them a few years ago. He'd posted something on BFRO. He was a senior at Columbus East High School. And Luke had found it and says, oh, can you go over and talk to him while I'm at school? And I was like, yeah, sure. And went over and I talked to the guy's dad, and he says, yeah, he saw something out here. And the reason I knew it was this edition over here is because it said a city park with a lake, and there are 11 city parks in Columbus, but only one of them has a lake, and that's right next to us. And then, 2 years ago, the kids were out in the pond. I have a kayak, and they were screwing around with a kayak and a john boat. And my uncle, he calls me up and he says, come over here and take a look at this. I went over. There was something down on the other side of the dam, moving back and forth. He goes, what is that? I said, I don't know. He said, go down there and check it out. And so I got down there. By the time I got there, there was nothing there. But he said, I said, what did you see? He says, I don't know, it was something black and it's bobbing back and forth. Whatever. But that's been probably 3 years. But we've got Camp Atterbury is just to the north and to the west of us. And then we have what's called Columbus Youth Camp. And at the same time I went over and talked to the guy at Black Oak about the BFRO report, I just went ahead and drove on down to youth camp, and the guys were closing up for the night. And I said, you guys ever see anything strange around here? And they were like what? And I said, oh, I don't know, just, something strange. And they were like, you need Bigfoot? And I was like, well, And they go, yeah, they're back here. We call them river monkeys. And I was like, what?
That's interesting. So they actually call them river monkeys, huh?
Yeah, they apparently, well, then I started talking to my cousin, and I said, river monkeys. And they said, yeah, remember Grandpa used to talk about river monkeys? And that his farm is just north about 4 miles, and the river goes right through it. And he'd always, I remember Grandma say, don't tell them that. You'll get something in their head they can't get out. And I was, okay.
When that one ran between the home, did you actually see it, or was it more or less you could hear it running in between the houses? I
heard it and I saw it. I've got my back porch is on the east side. It's like just a chunk taken out of the house. And the trees, I can't see them from the back porch, but I got a raspberry patch here. And then I got a big bush on the end of it. And when Evelyn turned on the lights, I saw it. It was just scooting behind that big bush, and that's when I got the shotgun and went down there, and I looked in the ravine right back behind here, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 big trees right there. And I'm shining with one hand, and I've got the shotgun in the other. That's when I heard it doing clicking over here at the burn pile. And so I came back, and I went toward the front side of the barn, and then started going down the west side of the barn, and that's when I heard the damn bird call, and then something else, the bird call and clicking over towards Johnson's horse pasture. And I was like, that's it. Thank God Luke called. I'm out of here.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
There's a time to be brave. There's a time to be brave and a time to just skedaddle.
Can you describe what you saw?
Well, whatever went to the burn pile, it wasn't all that big. I mean, I was thinking, okay, that's maybe my size. I'm 6'6", and the one, it was much smaller than the one I saw out of Tahoe. And I really don't know how big that one was over in Brown County, but it was damn good size. Who was it? We put a timber frame up down in Paoli, and this lady paid $250,000 for that house. And I went down there to show it a buddy of mine in the construction business, and this has been probably 91 or 92, and she had it for sale. And I asked her, I said, why are you selling it? She says, there's something out here in the woods. I'm scared of it. I'm not staying out here anymore. And she moved. And I never knew what it was. But then there were some reports that came from Paoli that some of the truck drivers that deliver still gas, the natural gas for homes, they'd run across some of these things. And then over towards Story, which is in Brown County, south on 135, I had a couple buddies that deliver gas down that way. So they almost ran over one that was in the middle of the road about 4 o'clock in the morning when it's real cold out. That's been 10 years ago.
Well, definitely keep me updated on anything that's going on around that property, if you would, Eric, if you don't mind. I would love to hear if there's anything else going on around the property. Do you hear them often on your property?
No, not at all. Every once, like in the fall, I think they come over to hunt whatever it is, and Luke's more up on it than I am. He's saying that, coyotes and, some of the other predators are in competition with them, and they're going to take them out first so that they got the deer. And Luke's, he works at Miami University over in Oxford, Ohio, and he was living down in Riley, and he gets off at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he was sitting in his driveway, and he's out in the middle of nowhere. And he said he turned the radio on, and he was just sitting there chilling out. And he looked over and saw knees look out of his car window, and then it walked off, and he said he didn't turn the lights on. He just watched it. And they got a security light back behind the house. And there's a tree house. It's 10 foot up in the air. And he says, this thing ducked to get into the tree house. You need to talk to him, too. But we're going to...
Luke's your son?
We're going to go... Yeah, Luke's my son. He's bigger than I am.
Yeah, well, definitely keep me updated. And, yeah, send me Luke's info. I would love to talk with him and talk what he's experienced. And I can't thank you enough, Eric, for coming on and sharing the encounters and just all the different experiences that you had. I still think about that poor guy that you picked up that crapped himself.
He was so freaked out, man. But, I mean, once we got everything taken care of down there at the Shell station, I just said, where do you live? And he says, I'm going to Greensburg. And I just took him to Greensburg. We didn't say diddly squat. About halfway between Brown County and Columbus, I turned the radio on, but we didn't say anything.
Yeah, and that's actually more common than most people realize. You would think the normal reaction would be sit there and talk about what just happened, but actually the normal reaction is not to talk about it, just to kind of sit there. You guys are probably soaking it in mentally. You know what I mean?
No, I was like, that didn't happen. It just didn't frickin' happen. I think everybody's starting to see these things.
Yeah, more and more people are starting to see them, and more people are starting to come out and talk about them. A lot of guys have recently had encounters back in the 70s, and they're just now coming out and talking about it, and talking about the things they've seen, talk about the things they've experienced. So I think you're right. I think more and more people are coming forward and wanting to share what they've seen, what they've experienced. It's becoming more mainstream, I think. Well, like I said, I'd like to speak to Luke and keep me updated with everything else going on there. And thank you again for being here.
Well, you're welcome. If I can get a hold of Luke, I'll have him give you an email and tell you about that Riley thing.
Yeah, please do. Please do.
All right.
And next, let's go to Tony Burke. Again, Tony is a researcher and a truck driver that had an encounter. Tony, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
No problem.
Tell me about the first time you ran into a Sasquatch. Tell me about the very first encounter that you ever had. Where were you at? What were you doing? And then just kind of walk me into the encounter if you don't mind.
Okay, well, the first one I want to tell about is me as a child up in Ohio, right on the outskirts of Bell Fountain. During the daytime, we heard we was in the kitchen in the old house, and this is way back a long lane, and way down in the valley, and there's a creek runs alongside there. We was on the radio. I heard on the radio that my mom and dad, everybody sitting around and listening to the radio, and I heard Bigfoot sighted in the area a few times. So I was like, I asked my dad, so where's this at? He said, it sounds like it's coming this way. I put it off like, I don't know if he's telling the truth or he didn't want to go to the area or whatever, but it come across that a few people sighted it and where they sighted it at. And
what year is this, Tony?
It was probably in the late 70s.
Okay.
And
so you guys are sitting around as a family, and you guys hear over the radio that there was a sighting nearby. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I think someone was doing dishes or something like that, kitchen work or whatever. We listened to the radio, and we was here to listen to the music. But then a news bulletin come across, and later that night, it was dark out and everything. We had some hunting dogs. We had all kinds of farm animals. And the hunting dogs started going crazy, started choking on their chains and stuff like that. It was going crazy, and Dad and everybody turned out the lights and got the gun out, and then we smelled some awful smell outside, and so everybody got quiet and everything, and we hear a loud, long breeze right alongside the walls. We right next to the walls. We could hear it through a little old house. And my dad, he went outside of the gun, a flashlight, I guess. He couldn't find anything. He came back in. He said he sent us to into town that night. But we lost one of our dogs. We don't know what happened to it. We don't know if it broke the collar or broke the chain or anything. If I was right now my age, I'd be out there looking for prints, right when it happened. Then we skipped to about 4 years ago, 3.5 years, 4 years ago. My dad was down from Ohio, and I drive semi now, so and he told me about a Bigfoot that he seen in Ohio that was real tall. He said he was seriously tall, and he was running across the field, and his buddy was driving somewhere, and he told his buddy to turn around. He seen a Bigfoot, and he said he cut it off on another road, and the guy went around, he laughed at him and everything, and went to the next town over. Then they come back through. He's wondering where it was. He said, it's done gone now. And my dad's had a wooden leg all his life, and he hunted, fish, trapped all his life, and he had never seen one. And that was just a coincidence. He's over there in Ohio, like about mid-Ohio. He told me that he seen one, so I said, well, I'm driving semi now. I just started. I said, going to different states and all through the mountains and everything. I started looking, you know. I started paying attention more way out in the woods on both sides of me, as far as I can see. You know, I rode along and I've seen things, you know, thought it might be something, you know, thought it might be one or whatever. But October 2013, I picked up a load in around Duncan and Spartanburg area in South Carolina. I was coming back down 85, runs along through Hartwell Lake and into Atlanta. And right before I was heading out of South Carolina in the evening, about 4 or 5, I seen it was just a heavy downpour of rain. I mean, it was a real heavy downpour of rain. And I come out like a wall of it. And then I had my windshield wipers cleaned off, and about mile marker number 7 in Oconee County Fairplay, South Carolina. And I checked my gauges, and I looked something in my peripheral vision to the right, and I looked up, and it couldn't be no more in my face, clear Bigfoot. It just, I've been looking, you know, running up and down that road, same road for interstate system for a long time, you know, every day, just about it, making deliveries to South Carolina, North Carolina, and looking both ways and everything. And this thing just happened to come right out, right in front of my semi, so alongside the bank, still in the grass. And I hit my brakes a little bit. I knew the car was behind me. I couldn't stop, but I could slow down. So I was looking at it as I was looking, you know, everything about it. Looked like a tall Chewbacca, you know. Looked like over 10 foot. It had long hair, long erect arms like a orangutan. It's kind of wavy. And long hair in the back of the head and the neck like a horse's mane. And short hair all over the body like a reddish-brown dead pine needle color. So I was sitting there watching it run. It was a real fast walk. I mean, it's so smooth. It didn't run like a human with arms going up and down or body, you know, rising and falling and dropping. It's just like a steady, smooth flow. And his hair was straight back like somebody's on a motorcycle. And I was watching, I was thinking, you know, I know the name for it is Bigfoot or whatever, but this man is just running alongside the interstate. And I said, what's this running thing running after? And I was thinking, what's it? I was thinking Bigfoot. I looked down at his feet, and I couldn't see his feet. It's all covered with hair. And then I was like, what's this thing maybe running to or whatever? I got my bumper right up next to it. I was looking over at it, and it ran straight back up into the woods. I looked back into the woods. I started to pull over, and I was like, well, I can't go in the woods with it without, you know, some kind of gun protection and everything. I wanted to get a video and just chase it and just, you know, stay on it, whatever. And I just couldn't do it. I went back to Georgia, and then I eventually got my gun carrying permit, went into the area. There's old barns in that area, and old house that was for sale, been for sale for a long time. And there's barns and hay in the barns and everything. And that was the first one, October 2013. It was like early in the month. Then I really seen like one every, you know, couple months or one every month for at least a year and a half. 2014 and 2015, I've seen them in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee. And I've seen one.
Is it mainly when you're on the road is when you're seeing them?
Yep, right there on like a side road or a major interstate. Seen one on a side road in Calhoun, Georgia. It was where Trail of Tears started on 225, right off of I-75. Go east on 225, right off 75, about a mile on the right. It's got a Trail of Tears started over there in one place, and they had to keep it all cut down and everything. The old buildings back in there. I told my There's a creek running along through there too, and a river also. And I was riding along, had my daughter in the car. I said, "There's one right there." I said, "Look," and I don't think she's seen it. She don't look what I tell her to. And then I looked. I pulled into the entrance, and she said, "No, no." I started getting out of the car. I had my gun, my camera on. So she wanted to go to Mom's house. Took her to Mom's house. Come back. Went in there. I couldn't find it. This thing was about 8, 9 foot. It was black. It was missing hair on the side of his face and on the side of his arm and chest. And it was just standing there, about 3 foot off tree line, looking at the road there. It had about big black eyes, like orange, like size of oranges. And
can I ask you about your first?
What?
Can I ask you a question about the first encounter?
What? Yeah.
When you saw this thing on the side of the road, how far away from your truck is it running?
It's probably about right there alongside the interstate, and that bank's probably about 20 foot from it. And this thing ran probably about, I say, at least 100 foot, 125 foot.
Before it went off into the woodline?
I mean, I watched it. This thing probably ran about 50. I mean, it was moving along. I mean, it's 10 foot. It just looked like it wasn't even in the, running as fast as it can. It was running, but it wasn't running as fast as it can. I was thinking this thing could probably run over 3 or 4 mountains, and then before it got tired, I'm thinking it's more or less had mostly, animal to it.
And was it on 2 legs the whole time?
Yep.
And were you able to?
It was.
Were you able to get any of the facial features when you were looking at it?
Negative on the first one. I've seen the sides and seen the back of it. I got up there alongside of it, and it took right, like a diagonal, right up into the woods.
I gotcha. And then how many years later was it that you saw your second one?
Yeah, it was probably a few months later.
Okay.
And I seen that one on 225. It was something was strange about it. It was had a bulge right there on the stomach, like it just ate, like about the size of a basketball. I mean, it bulged out. I got thinking a couple of days later it might have been pregnant, but it didn't have no breasts. I don't know if it just ate something, ate a dog or what. I just don't know.
Like it had like a pot belly?
Yeah, it wasn't a pot belly, it was a bulge.
Interesting.
And I don't know, it looked like facial expression on it looked like he was having a rough time. I don't know.
What did the face look like?
Face sort of looked like a human shape type face, but it had some, I'd say animal kind of facial features, like dark color. It just didn't look human.
What was it mainly about the face that caught your attention?
It looked, I'm not sure, like the missing hair on the side of it, on that one side, along the side of it. And it looked spooky, the way it looked. The way it was looking towards the road. And let's see, I've seen one that was in Bessemer City, North Carolina. That's right on I-85. A couple hours, about 2.5, 3 hours right above Oconee County, went on the same side, same interstate. And it was on the north side of 85. It was Bessemer City, North Carolina, and I was coming back with a load up there one evening. And I was looking up through the power line, and one ran down the power line. This looked like a juvenile. And it was all black. It didn't have it wasn't skin. It was, hair. And this thing ran down the power line like a J shape out into the woods. And this thing was, it looked like it was having a good time, but it wasn't, from our society and everything. I mean, it looked like it was he was, kind of laughing, having a good time. But there was just something strange about it. And I went up past one exit, went up to the next exit, turned around, went back, and there's an old hotel shut down there. A lot of air conditioners out of them and everything, filled with furniture, and I parked in there. And, anything can crawl up in any of them places and stay warm and everything. And I walked down through the woods and searching that area, and I found a big deer down there. I think he was chasing that deer. And
now, when you say
one of above there.
What do you mean it was having a good time?
I don't know. It looked like it was, a kid running down the fire line, kind of full stride. And it was, you look at somebody, it looked like they was, like a human having a good time.
I gotcha. So just the impression,
like he was playing, maybe.
Yeah, the impression you were getting.
And yeah,
I gotcha.
So I think he was chasing that deer down in that valley there. I couldn't find that Bigfoot anywhere, and I walked down through there, and all that place up there was right above on that next hill there. There's an old house that was there, and the window was out of it. And I looked through the window, and there was a big hole in the ceiling of it. And then I was looking around for handprints or fingerprints or anything, and I couldn't see anything. And there's a few old shacks there with hay in them and straw and, whatever. And it looked like top of one barn, it looked like it might have been, laid down in and everything. I have checked that area a few times since, it snowed, thinking it might go in there where it snows maybe, stay warm, and looking for prints and everything, and I never found anything. But that time that I went back the first time to look for it and everything, I seen that deer down in there. I seen this kid walking from the store carrying some groceries. I told him what I was doing down over there and what I seen. And he said, well, something was throwing rocks at me the other day while I was walking through here. So I said, well, they do that. I've heard of them doing that. And then I seen one evening in going across Hartwell Lake on a bridge. I looked over, and this thing was floating like a foot underneath the water. Probably, it was real tall. Not sure how tall it was, but it was floating like a foot underneath the water. It was like a log underneath the water. Only thing was above water was his head. And it just floating across the lake, I was like, there's not anybody see this, it was probably about 30 yards out. And then, so I pulled over on the interstate off the side, and it's got the ripples along the side of the interstate, and that made a lot of noise, and I pushed my air brakes and made a lot of noise, and got the semi-stop. That was a long ways, down the road, and I had to run all the way back to the center of the bridge because I couldn't see around the bank if it went straight to the bank. So I couldn't find it. I ran up the bank to the edge of the bridge, went up the bank, and went over into the woods. I couldn't find it. And I had to go take the load to where I was going to South Carolina at a certain time, so I had to go back to the truck and go on. And I seen one in Chattanooga one day. I was riding along where interstate splits at. There's some rivers and ponds and stuff in there, that area. I've hiked it before, after I seen one. But I was riding along, and I seen this Bigfoot way back in this power line, way back off the road, probably about 90 yards off the road. And all I seen was the chest, about waist up, and it was black. And this thing was, it hadn't been huge. It was wide. And I seen it. It was looking at traffic going back and forth on the interstate. No human, watches interstate or any traffic like this thing does. This thing was shaking its head real fast, side to side, real fast, irregularly. And then next there's a road cuts alongside there, goes right alongside where they're doing construction at and everything. And this thing jumps back like it didn't want to be seen by this car. And I don't know if it's I seen it or not, because I was up in the semi way on an interstate, was pretty far away from it. And so about a week or so, I drove up there, about 35 minutes from my house, north of me. I live on 75 there. And then I hiked the area, and I find all kinds of footprints around swamps and stuff, and nobody should be not wearing shoes. And which I found some footprints in town where I'm at and everything, but there's all kinds of footprints around there. It's like rivers and creeks and stuff that overflood over there, and the water washing back, it leaves it muddy along the sides and the banks and all through that area. And I find prints here and there and everywhere. I go up there a few times and hike up to there and everything. And I started a website that I'm not sure when I started that website. It might have been the first or second sighting, but I started a website, try to keep up with where they've been seen at and everything else, about them, and try to learn and everything, what I found out and all the evidence I find, and try to post on there. And I had people that just wanted to join sites, so I just started accepting people, and I got district attorneys and police officers and coaches that want to go and want to listen. I hear about everything, find out about all walks of life. It's Appalachian Sasquatch and Bigfoot research. I've had people fly in and drive in, and we go hiking and everything, and I'm getting people joining every day. But
let me ask you this, Tony. Have you ever looked at, and I'm always, and this will be kind of some skeptical questions, so forgive me. I'm surprised that more truck drivers don't see these things. I'm always shocked when I talk to a lot of truck drivers that really haven't seen anything. I would probably expect out of everyone they would be the ones to see them. But have you ever questioned some of your sightings? I'll give you an example. And I'm sure
yes, I have.
Well, I'll give you an example.
I've questioned my sightings because we have a Comic-Con down here in Atlanta. Everybody dresses up. There's Chewbacca's down there. But nobody can, I went through it over and over and over. Nobody could run like that one I seen in South Carolina. Nobody's that tall. If they're that tall, I've taught about basketball players. I said, anybody this tall cannot run. Is not as good as this shape. Everybody who has been 10 foot or more is deformed or has to run with a cane or are not in shape.
Yeah.
So far, And
well, no, I don't mean that sighting. What I mean by that is, and I'll give you an example, and this isn't meant to question you by any means. Here's the point I'm trying to make. When I've talked to a lot of witnesses in the past, there's a common thing that happens sometimes in the psychology of sightings, especially real sightings. Sometimes you can tell when someone almost has had a real sighting by this simple fact. I've talked to, I'll give you a perfect example. I won't say the name, but I went out to this person's property. No question in my mind that they have had legitimate sightings on their property. No question. But sometimes when I go out there, they'll go, see these two cross sticks? Sasquatch did that. And I'm just, it looks like just two sticks that fell to me. It doesn't look like anything special. Or you'll see like 2 or 3 rocks on top of each other, and they'll come by and explain to you that Sasquatch did that. And, it's...
Let me tell you, I really don't know. I've never seen one actually break a stick or anything. But let me tell you something about the sticks being broke. See, I drive the interstate a lot, and I know I've heard about them, being broke and everything, and stick structures and stuff like that I'm interested in. But when I'm driving along the interstate and I see a broken tree when none of them in the ground is broke and everything, and it's just out in the order area that it's broke, and it's like, I'm thinking this is a sure sign that that's, a Bigfoot's broke that.
Well, no, the point.
I'm not sure if it's me and all the information I've had over the years and everything else, but I've actually took my GPS and you go on aerial view, and the trees are usually broke on the opposite side of the interstate from a pond or creek. So whatever way the tree is broke, that is facing towards, is broke towards, the piece hanging down is going towards a pond. I mean, the pond might be 30, 40, 50, 100 yards out, but it's broke towards a water source.
No. Here's the point I was trying to make. How long have you been driving truck?
Semi, I have been driving for about 4.5 years.
Okay.
Probably about 5 if you add on 1999 when I come out of the truck driving school for about 6 months, and then went with a concrete company for 10 years. 2009, I got laid off.
The point I'm trying to make is you saw something that changed your life. You saw something that freaked you out. You saw something that wasn't supposed to.
That makes me want to. I used to walk out the door after seeing it. I used to walk out the door of my house, and we got woods all along the sides of it. And I'm just thinking, out there in my yard, this thing could run out. One could run out, grab you, carry off, no problem. There's woods everywhere. And people walking around. And I mean, I thought about all this stuff a long time ago. People walking around every day doing, everything, and people hiking and riding bikes and everything else, and they just don't know. They don't know the reality. It's just, if people knew, then it would change the whole society's reality is outside, what outside means.
Right. I'm wondering, though, is you had that dramatic experience, and now when you're driving around, do you think that sometimes, and I ask this question very respectfully, do you think sometimes that it's somewhat post-traumatic stress of driving around, and now you look over, and it's like, oh, no.
It's post-traumatic of not working 14 hours a day, which every truck driver does. It's post-traumatic of what you've seen. That was so close, and it's not just one, it's several. I've seen several over the years, and now I hike on weekends and everything, but that Chattanooga sighting, that I had an oil company owner who was interested in seeing one, or he's interested in them and everything. I told him to come down. He called, and he had to cancel out the first time. He come down the second time. He flew all the way down to Atlanta. He's a oil company owner, gas company owner of a guy. He's in Wisconsin. Flew down and rented him a car. Come up to Calhoun. We met up. He has his fiance and a guy he got up with it. Went to school with. And we got up the next day. Went up there in Chattanooga and hiked around. We was taking pictures of all the footprints and everything. I've done casts up there and got GPS on the cast I've done and posted photos in my website. And then we went back. The guy said that he was going to bring a night vision scope. He told me what kind it was. I looked up on YouTube, figured out how to use it before he came down. And that evening, we went in there, waited till it got dark. I said, this is the other area. This is actually the area that I actually seen it at. The other areas around there is where we found all kinds of prints. So this big area in there, you walk in, it kind of overflows And it's got like a lot of like dead vegetation. It's like a foot of it. It's a real soft area. It's real open all through there and everything. And we walk in there and it's dark. We got one flashlight. I carry a Glock 45 with extended clip just for protection. And we walk in there. I tell them I don't know what they're do. You know, I ain't never been in the woods with them at night or close to them in the daytime, you know, out in the open, outside the vehicle. So we walk in there, and I got a cell phone. I recorded Bigfoot yells that was recorded in California. That a Texas guy got a response off of also. So I had it on my cell phone. I had a megaphone I bought from Radio Shack. I was on call blast, but blow it through that megaphone. And we got in there, and the guy does a wood knock on a tree, a stick. This thing responds back. He must have had a stick in his hand. I don't know if they carry sticks on them or what. It happened so quick and must have a stick in his hand. It would knock about 35 yards out to the left of us, in between us and the interstate. And that's the area I wanted to go in there and look through. You know, off the little path through there, you can look through there. There's a tree opening right past there where we was. And he does the wood knock 3 times, and it responds all 3 times. And I think he himself, it happened so quick, I think he himself, he only heard like once or twice. Everybody else heard 3. You know, he did wood knock, it knocked back. And he waited, did another wood knock, it knocked back 3 times. So we walk in there further. We know what's in there. And we're looking through this opening. It's a night vision scope. And you can see 100 yards. Each time you push a button on it, it goes in 30 yards. And the darker it is, the clearer you can see, like a daylight through that scope. And when you pull your eye away from the scope, it's like it blinds. It's like a flashlight.
Yeah.
With shining eye. It takes a minute eye to adjust back. We're looking, we can't go back in there because it's flooded all the area that's close to us. So we're sitting there on the path looking through that opening there, and we can't see it. So I started doing some call blasting on my cell phone, playing Bigfoot yells through that megaphone, and getting no response. We did that for about 8 minutes. And then the guy, he yells with his hands. This thing yells back. Their Bigfoot yells at us. And then, so this is the first time I've been in the woods with that yelling, one yelling. And then, not even a minute later, one yells, he's about 90 to 100 yards out on the right of us. And when this one yells, it's a giant. Everybody's like, golly. This thing yells like an elephant or a lion that's got force behind it. Everybody knows this was giant, just the way it yelled. I mean, it was yelled with force. And then, so we was looking around. I was taking pictures of everybody there, you know, in the group. And then, and we was looking around with the night vision scope all around. And then, not even a minute, about 5 minutes later, this thing had traveled about 80, 90 yards. Probably about, I see it here, so it's probably about 25 yards off of us. And it yelled real long yell. And we could see what direction it was, we know what direction it was headed in. And we're pretty sure it was the giant. And then I said, well, he's coming in, you know, he's coming closer. And we was looking there for a long time for night vision scope. We couldn't find it. You know, we were looking with flashlight and everything. We could see nothing. Then we eventually started working our way out. Right there in that power line area, that oil company owner, we're sitting there looking at the night vision scope, and the oil company owner sees it bobbing out from the tree line and bob back in the tree line, waving back and forth with his body, looking out, looking back in. And the oil company owner, he's describing, his name is John Palmer, he's describing the way he's feeling the whole time. He ain't describing the Bigfoot, he's describing his reaction. He said my hair stand up along my back, and I forget what all he was talking about and everything. And then he hands me the scope. So I start looking, and I'm looking on the right side of the ditch. The ditch runs along to a big creek or river right up there behind there. I'm looking the right side, and then looking over to the left a little bit, but I couldn't find it. I hand him back the scope. He couldn't find it. So he left. We come back up there the next day, and I got a picture of him. He wanted the picture holding the stick up, how tall he thinks it was. He held the stick up. It must have been a giant. I wouldn't doubt it. Wouldn't doubt it one bit. That thing had traveled probably, 70 yards, pitch black darkness, through over rivers and streams and around swamps and thick brush and everything. Anything had traveled all that far in about 5 minutes. I don't know anything that does that.
Yeah,
so I was thinking more or less the thing is nocturnal.
Were you able to capture any of those sounds? I mean, could I put them up on the website, or do you have them available?
No, I used my cell phone for call blasting and taking pictures, and I didn't have recording devices at that time, and just like that one that ran alongside the interstate in Oconee County, ran for about 150 yards right alongside the interstate, right there in front of my semi. I'd give my right and left arm for that if I had it on a dash cam at the time.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
My name would have been in history books all over the world. It would have been. When you look up the Bigfoot video, it would have been Tony's Bigfoot video, and classic would have been Patty's.
No, and I understand that. Your mind's not going that way to want to look over and grab your cell phone. You're too fixed on, and that's pretty normal behavior.
I mean, my cell phone, my iPhone, I use a company phone. It's free calls, and it's just a cheap phone. And I have a iPhone 5S and has iPhone 6. At the time, I think I had an iPhone 5. Might have been 4, I don't know. But the thing is, I always keep my smartphone turned off. I don't use it for service. I use it for Wi-Fi, taking pictures or videos. And when I pull it out of my pocket, turn it on, because I always save battery leaving it off. I turn it on, that thing takes over a couple minutes just to turn on. And then you got to go through the apps to the video, and then, start shooting. And by the time, the semi I was driving, and then plus, on the rate of speed I was, and the way it was going, it was, I don't know. I wasn't even thinking about it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that's understandable. A lot of people, especially will say in situations like...
Yeah, it's the first sighting, I actually had. And I've actually seen an unidentified flying object before, and, it was about 40 foot around. It was a light, great light. And May of 2015, 2014. But this thing right here, this Bigfoot, that would be the most amazing thing I've seen, was the Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, keep your eyes and your ears peeled, especially when you're out driving. Man, I'd attach a GoPro to that windshield of yours and just have a GoPro filming constantly. But, if you have anything else that happens, if you're ever out, feel free you're always welcome back to the show. So come on back and give us an update if if anything new happens or if you see anything.
Yeah, I bought a GoPro, and I've had, that thing it was a GoPro Plus, and I had about 600, and it was a chest strap I was going to use and everything when I go hiking. And on weekends, and this thing had so many settings that I said I couldn't figure it out. I took it back. I said, this $600 ain't sitting there. Not, Then I actually had tree cams that was infrared. I couldn't get them working right. I took it back. But a lot of people say, get them dash cams and cams for the sides of trucks and everything else. Eventually, maybe I will, and get some side cameras and everything. I've seen another one in Jefferson, Georgia. It's right on alongside 85, and this thing was black. It was early morning, And the thing was probably about 10 foot. It's standing alongside. It's standing right next to up on the bank off the interstate a little ways. There's a lot of about 15 foot tall pine trees along there, and it was standing right next to the pine tree. I mean, I couldn't see no facial features, nothing. All I seen was black, solid black. But this was a Bigfoot. It was standing there looking, standing alongside, and I was just riding along in the semi. I just had to go on,
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Okay, yeah. See, eventually, I want to get where I can spend months out there. And then, when I first seen the one, and then maybe somewhere in the time of seeing the second one or third one, I thought about selling everything I had, even getting tax money and everything, just living out there until I get closest, longest video of one. I've actually had to pull back myself from not doing that. But
I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would do that.
I plan on spending my vacations out there, and for weeks, searching. I want to search from Atlanta all the way up into North Carolina along that stretch where I seen 3. And then they actually call the one I seen in South Carolina. Actually, a guy in North Carolina has seen, if not the same one just like it. He said when it went back in the woods, he hit his head on this tree branch. That tree branch is 10 foot tall. It come in close to his dog, and his dog's chain got tied around his leg. They call it Nobby. Gave it a nickname up there in North Carolina, kind of northwest of Kings Mountain, about an hour and a half. And they actually had the town go out there and look for it. They've had T-shirts and everything else painted. Says Finding Nobby. Well, I appreciate being on the show. That's about.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it too. I think that honestly, I wouldn't quit your job to get a video of one, because a video of one, I think you're going to be disappointed pretty quick. I mean, it could be, you could have a video of one sitting there eating, and having the saliva drip out of its mouth, and people call it a fake. People call it.
Oh yeah.
You were a master CGI, and you know, and so most people don't. Most people have half a brain.
Yeah, when it comes to me, it's going to be end up. I mean, hey, believe me, don't. That's real. It's going to be real. And they got these new things coming out. These these drones and everything. I might try one of them about tax time.
Yeah. Well, let me know how that works out. I know I got a guy I'm talking to in Texas that he's using a drone, and it's a pretty advanced drone. But let me know if you're looking at him, if you need any, want my 2 cents on it, or I can put you in touch with him, and he can give you his 2. He knows a million times more than I do.
All right,
he might
appreciate it, man. I appreciate you coming off from Washington all the way here in Georgia.
Oh, I appreciate it, Tony, and thank you so much for coming on.
All right, maybe I'll get out there sometime.
Thank you again, Tony. And thank you to the audience out there listening. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email, wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out the website, sasquatchchronicles.com, for additional shows throughout the week. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you this evening. My guest tonight is a hunter. I'll be bringing Zach on here shortly to share his encounter. And, I always love talking to hunters. They have their finger on the trigger. They're out there looking for natural animals. They're out there, they're preying on animals out in the wild. And so generally when they come across something that doesn't add up or they've never seen before, they're usually very clear on their encounters. Tonight's no exception. So when I bring Zach on, I think you'll find his encounter to be very fascinating and very interesting. Kind of a scary encounter too, even though throughout his encounter you'll realize the Sasquatch didn't really care a whole lot that he was there. Before we jump into that, I want to give a quick shout out to Joe, Tracy, Pam, Chris, and Mark on the website. I apologize if I'm missing someone from the group. But these members on the website, they were in the forums. And you may not, if you're not a member of the site, you may not be able to see the forums anymore. But I assure you they're there. They're definitely there. What's interesting is they started researching this Miller doc. And I'll give you the cliff notes of the Miller doc. Basically, the Miller doc, there was a gentleman named Dr. Miller. He was born in the early 1900s. He went to Harvard. He went to Yale. He's basically a scientist is what this guy is. And he started working for the forestry department back in the 60s. Or prior to the 60s, he started working for the forestry department. While working for the forestry department, he gets a call one day to go out and do an autopsy on these 3 bodies. All 3 bodies were supposedly dead when he shows up. One of them was still alive. But he goes through and he examines these 3 dead bodies. At first, they thought they were just feral humans out running around. And when he went in to examine them, he said, no, these are animals. It's a primate. And he starts describing the creatures. It sounds a little bit far-fetched at this point, but bear with me. He gets another call several years later to go and investigate another body that died in the Columbus storm back in, I think it was 62 or 63. Had died, had climbed up a tree, lightning had hit the tree, and basically the tree fell on top of this animal and killed it. So he goes out to investigate that creature. And he starts notating differences in the creatures. He says the ones in California look this way. They have subtle differences. The ones in Texas, they kind of have, here's some differences between this one. And he's describing the creatures. He talks about their scent glands, the ones that he had investigated in California. The scent glands were in the forearms. And the ones he investigated in Texas, the scent glands were actually underneath the armpits, and they had this horrible smell to them. But he goes through and he's describing these creatures. And there's other documents that back up this Miller doc. But he's going through and he's talking about his research, talking about what he's found, talks about classifying them. He calls them Cebidae, Telidae, and then he gives them a Greek name towards the end, like Texaconus. For the ones in Texas, the ones in the Pacific Northwest, he calls them Pacificonus. And he's describing that their differences are based on location. Basically, they're adapting to their environment. And he starts calling these things New World monkeys. And there's a little bit of communication with him back and forth between, there's obviously other scientists involved in this and the government. But what's interesting is you read through his document, he talks about the government setting aside land, protected land, for these creatures to reside in. And he talks about, and he names off specific areas in the document, which coincidentally add up to what he's saying. He says in 2005, they'll expand this particular land to this, they're going to expand it. And then again in 2012, they're going to expand these natural areas that aren't really open to the public. And the areas that he mentions, actually, it did happen. It's a real thing inside the document. And he talks about, they can't live in captivity. They die quickly in captivity. And there's something to what he's saying in a lot of his research and a lot of what he's saying about their jaws. Anyway, I'm throwing a lot at you right now. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot in this document. And there's another document that backs this one up. It's from a biologist that basically can't stand Dr. Miller. And this biologist is wanting to classify these animals this way. And so there's somewhat of an argument. But there's so much in this document, it's almost hard to look at this as a hoax. These documents have been sitting out on the web since, I think, 2009, 2010. No one's bothered to look at them. They've been buried in blog posts. It was originally sent to Linda Newton Perry, and it basically sat on her website. And so when Tracy, Joe, Pam, Chris, Mark, all these people got together and started researching this, they found out, yes, Dr. Miller was a real person. Yes, he did go to Harvard Law School. Yes, he did go to Yale. He did graduate. Yes, he did work for the U.S. Forestry Department. So they're really looking into researching this document, and they need some help. I'm going to try and help them as much as I can. Mark Zasky has agreed to help them as much as he can. but we're really looking into this document because I really think there's something here. If I thought it was a waste of time, I wouldn't even bother mentioning it on air. But it's a very fascinating doc. And so if you would hang out with us tomorrow night, Mark and I are going to go through the document and just do a quick introduction with the document, give you our thoughts on it, and then we're going to be having updates down the road as this investigation continues on what we find, and we'll share it with the audience on what we find. So look for that. Well, I've done enough babbling tonight. Zach, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Not a problem.
And if you would, kind of start from the beginning. Tell us what you were out doing and tell us what you saw and what you experienced.
Well, it was the day after opening day of deer season, and which is November 15th around here. So this was the 16th, and it was about, I would say, about 4:30 in the afternoon. And first, let me tell you, before this, we saw tons of deer in the morning of opening day, and I bow hunted 2 days previous and saw lots of deer then. And that day, though, that morning, I even saw deer. But that night when I went out, I didn't see a lick of anything, not even a trace of a deer, not even a, and all of a sudden this silence came across that is almost an eerie silence, and like almost to a point where something's not right. And, the birds stopped, the wind stopped, and just in the corner of my eye, I seen what looked like a dark black, like, big thing in the corner of my eye, and my first instinct was, that's a bear. But then I noticed it was on its back legs. And I know I've seen a lot of black bear in my day, but unless you know something, Wes, I don't know. I don't think black bears walk on two legs very long. And to my left, I would say 30 or maybe 40 yards away, I kept seeing this thing, but then this smell came that the best way to describe it is rotting meat, like a sweet, like, almost like rotting meat, and mixture of if somebody's got 3 or 4 dogs in a house that's soaking wet type smell, almost to a point where it could make you dry heave, basically. And when I looked over in the corner, this thing on the bottom of the hill, which I saw, I finally figured out this is not a bear. And like I told you before, you cannot misidentify this creature, because when it got to the bottom of the hill, and this hill is probably, I would say 30, 40 yards uphill as well. And it took me quite a while to get up there, and I'm in pretty good shape. I mean, I'm not in the best of shape now. 2 years have passed, but when I went up the hill, I struggled to get there. And when I got up there and I seen this thing on the back 2 legs move up this hill like it did, this is something that you just can't, like I said, misidentify, because this was so effortlessly. And this thing walked up the hill pretty much, like I said, effortlessly, with big strides. And it didn't even struggle to get up. And before that, I heard almost like a huff, not like a bear growl type deal, but almost like a huff, like, I guess it struggled a little bit, I would imagine, but I know I was out of breath. And when I got up to the top of the hill, it stopped, and it looked right at me. And I remember, like it was yesterday, Wes, the nostrils on this thing were pink like bubblegum. And it looked right at me and kind of gave me a look like it was smelling me, and I was carrying a 12-gauge shotgun at the time on me. And like I told you earlier, there's no way in the world, with the state of mind I was in, that I could even think about shooting this thing. There was so much fear that was put all of a sudden in me. And it's almost like the feeling, when your whole insides are like just sick to your stomach, like you want to vomit type, adrenaline, nervous, what's going to happen, you don't know the future type deal. And this thing looked at me, and it kind of turned its head to look at me. It kind of bent down with its head more than its body, and it kind of turned towards me, and it looked at me, I would say about 10 seconds maybe, and it turned back the other way and walked right up over top of the hill. And for about, I would say, 4 or 5 minutes, I sat there frozen like an icicle. I mean, there was no moving. I couldn't move. Because I know I made eye contact with this thing, and like we talked about earlier, I don't know if this thing saw that I wasn't a threat or knew that I was afraid, but I've heard that if they know you're afraid, it's dangerous. But if this thing wanted to maul me, Wes, this thing could have mauled me and torn me into shreds and threw me halfway across the world, and I wouldn't have been able to do a thing about it with a gun or not. And when this thing got over the hill, and I sat frozen for about 4 or 5 minutes, and I finally got the will to move, and I looked over the hill, and there's a good, I can't really describe how far the woods go back, but it's a long ways. It would take me a good 20 minutes to get to out of sight, and this thing was gone. But just when I thought, maybe I was seeing something, I heard what sounded, it almost sounded, it was like a high-pitched scream in the distance. Like it was a obnoxious sound, and my buddy that I was hunting with ended up putting it that it's a fox, but I've heard foxes scream. I've heard deer scream. I've heard, rabbits scream. This was not, the force behind this scream, and it wasn't like the roar like you hear. It was a scream, literally like a human scream, high pitch. And it was probably, I would say, half mile away, and I could hear it as clear as day. And that's when I kind of froze again, because I don't know enough about the subject. Like I forgot to say, I believed that it's possible, but I kind of just shoot it off. It'd be cool if it was real, but there's too many hoaxes out there for it to be real. But once you see it in the flesh, face to face, your whole mindset changes. And I'll tell you, that's after that scream, I knew I was either in trouble, or that they were communicating, or that it was literally killing somebody in the distance. So I wasn't feeling all that great. But like I said, the best describe its eyes. People say their eyes are red at night. This was dusk. It was starting to get dark, but this thing's eyes were almost like a green, yellowish, and like you said earlier, it might have been its, the white of its eyes were that color, but that's all I saw at the time. And like I said, its nostrils were pink like bubble gum. And later that day, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself here. But as soon as he was gone and that scream, I got out of there and I got the presence of mind. But as I was walking, I felt as if something was continuously watching me, like the whole way. And in that way, unless you've had it happen, the description of it, you can't explain it. But it felt like something had eyes on me. And as soon as I got in the clear, I sat on the ground and I vomited uncontrollably for probably 5-6 minutes. I think I looked at my watch and I threw up for 5 or 6 minutes. And my buddy, like I said, heard that same sound, but he said he thinks it was a fox. Now, somebody witnessed that scream as well, and he said it's an odd fox, but the vomiting thing, and I was sick to my stomach, and like you said earlier, it might have been adrenaline overload, but I threw up. I was sick to my stomach. I had to get out of there. And I finally did, and when I got home, or when I got back to I don't tell anybody because of the ridicule that would happen. What do you do? You can't say, oh, I just saw, Bigfoot, because people are going to laugh. And at that point, anybody laughs at me, I'd probably, and like I said, I got home and I went home. I couldn't be in the woods. There was no way that day.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Well, let me do this. Let's back up a little bit. So what time of day is this?
This was probably, with the daylight savings in Michigan, around deer season, 4:30, it starts to get dark. 5 o'clock, it's dark, and 5:15, it's pitch dark. So I was ready to pack it up when this happened. And so it was dusk. It was starting to get dark, and it was getting ready time to go, but what seemed like hours ended up being about a 15-minute span. But it seemed, Wes, like hours. Like I was in a standoff. Even though this thing didn't throw a threat to me, like I said, it could have mauled me, and it didn't. It just kept going.
Well, and then let me ask you, so are you in a tree stand at this point, or are you just perched up on a hill?
I'm perched up on a hill up against a stump, my same stump I've sat on for the last 10 years, and I've shot deer out of there. I've been in contact with bears there, and like I said, this was probably 40 yards up a hill, kind of an incline. And the way this thing, it was about 4:30 in the afternoon. It was getting to be dusk. So it was already creepy out there to begin with, but because of how well I knew those woods. But when I seen that, my my confidence went down the drain. Let's just say that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You're basically sitting there and you see what appears to be at first a black bear, and it's on two legs. And it continues to walk. And it walks up this hill. How far away from you is the creature?
I would say, honestly, and this is going to sound like a coincidence, but it was probably 40 yards. It was enough where I got because this hill on the incline, he was halfway up when I first seen him. And he was about 40 yards away, but when he got to the top, I would say he was within 15, 20 yards by that point. So he was fairly close, enough to see features. And like I forgot to tell the audience, it was a male. And definitely anybody who's seen it knows that you can identify that with those. It's not covered. So you know darn well it was a male. And like I said, I was probably 20 yards, I would say, tops at the point of him on the top and me on the top.
Okay. And so you guys make eye contact, or he comes up and makes eye contact. He's sniffing the air, and he looks at you.
Yep.
When you mentioned the eyes. One thing I thought was interesting about the eyes. Can you kind of describe the eyes a little bit?
Yeah. Well, when I was already looking over at him, and my head wasn't going to move, and he turned and looked right at me, and his eyes, the best way to describe it is like a greenish yellow, like, not neon, but like it was a sick looking eyes, like when somebody's got jaundice, and anybody out there, I don't mean to offend, but it's anybody who has seen jaundice where the eyes look like it looked like this thing was sick, but I don't know that because I don't know enough about them, but its eyes were not a red color. I didn't see the black of the eyes. I'm sure it was there, but the yellow and green was there, and it was just not a healthy looking eyeballs. How about that? That's the best way I can describe it.
And were you getting eye shine at this point? Is that what you're kind of describing?
No, and not eye shine. It was just, I could see when it looked at me, I could see the whites, but instead of whites, it was like a faded pale green yellow type look to it. There was no eye shine yet, and that I know of course, but there was no way it could, there was enough daylight at this point where I could see clearly his eyeballs. And there was definitely eyeballs there, and they were sunk into the face somewhat. But the eyeballs were, like I said, all I could see was that greenish yellow tint in the eyeball itself.
Yeah, and that's something that's common. A lot of witnesses describe that are able to get as close as you got. They'll describe it as being kind of jaundice, or it's almost like it's sick, the way the eyes are yellow. I wanted to ask you, can you describe the face and the body and just do a full description for the audience of what you... Absolutely. Basically, like I told you earlier, I couldn't really, in the point I was in, to see the below the knees, I couldn't really make out feet but all I know is this thing was ripped like a muscle man. And with all the hair that it had, it was jet black, like the blackest it can get. And you could still see the tone on this thing, and you could see the genitals of it. And its arms, like I said earlier, it makes Hulk Hogan's arms look foolish. This thing, if it wanted to, it could pick up a grizzly bear and snap it on its back. And the thing that was so intimidating about it was how its head was like set on its body. Like there was a neck, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't really, like I said, everything's kind of because of the state I was in, and I get chills talking about it, and I get, shaky. But the tone, it was proportioned oddly. Its arms were very long. It was almost, like I said, it didn't look like a chimpanzee or anything like that, but its arms were definitely not human tone to the waist. It was below the waist, almost to the knees. And was that because it was climbing uphill? I don't know. But it was, like I said, its nostrils were as pink as, but you could definitely smell this thing. You could definitely smell it. There was no denying what you're smelling at this point. But its legs were really toned, and its arms were toned, and its chest and torso was as wide as anything I've seen. We're talking as wide as an armchair, or not an armchair, but like a recliner. This thing, like I said, it's something you can't misidentify. It's something you absolutely cannot misidentify with a bear, because I've seen them,
And bears are big, don't get me wrong, but these black bears here aren't, I mean, it even's bigger than a grizzly bear was, and I've seen them as well. And this thing's torso was the biggest part of its body. I mean, and like I said, the head looked like it was just sitting there. But I know there was a neck, but it had really long hair. Like you could take 2 handfuls of the hair on this thing. And like I said, it's just the way it was effortlessly is what really kind of gives me the chills now, is how effortlessly, and knowing how much I struggled to get up that hill, how easy that thing coasted up that hill. It was almost like it was on a ramp going up. I mean, it was something. I mean, like I said, you can't misidentify it.
Yeah, and the other question I want to ask you, so you're looking at this thing. Can you kind of describe the face?
It was covered by hair, but its nose was really short, like wide but sunk in. There was no point nose like a human being has. There was no bridge, really. It was more a small bridge pushed in. Nostrils were big enough where I could see them from where I was. And like I said, its eyes, and I could see facial expressions. Like when it was trying to smell me, it was kind of like a animal when it's smelling you. It kind of crunches its face together. But it wasn't quite like a cat or a dog. It kind of had its nose out more than anything. Kind of, but it had a facial expression kind of looking at me like, who are you type deal, or what are you doing here? Or maybe it was saying, good day. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't really, I was in such a state of shock at the moment. I really didn't pay as much attention to detail as I wanted to, but I saw enough to know, that this thing was not anything that has been seen very often by people.
How tall would you say the creature was?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because the next day, or the next weekend I came up, it was either the next weekend or next day, and see, everything's so, but it was 2 days later. I went out there with my buddies, and I know that when he was climbing, he grabbed onto a tree and pulled on it. Now, if that was to help him up, or he was putting a sign out, whatever they do, because don't they twist branches or something like that, or something along those lines. And where his arm was, he didn't have to reach his arm up. His arm was, just resting on it, and then he twisted it. And we measured, and I was already uneasy being out there, but, my buddy didn't see it. I had to measure, and this branch went up to 9 feet. And this branch was at 9 feet, and then you give or take 4 or 5 inches for the upper part of his body, you're looking at 9 feet 4, 9 feet 5. And I could have been wrong at 9 feet. It was over 9 feet tall, though.
Now, you mentioned your friend. Was he there with you during this encounter, or was he...
He was hunting about a mile away, and he heard the sound that I heard, and then he blamed it on a fox. And to this day, I'm telling him that was not a fox. But he never encountered or saw it, but he heard the same sound I did.
Yeah, it's interesting. I almost wonder if that scream, like you and I were talking about earlier, almost wonder if that scream was kind of a warning to the rest of them that you guys were in the area. But the behavior of the creature is interesting, that the behavior when it walks up to you, kind of looks at you, sniffs the air. Did you notice any sort of expression on its face? Did it change at all, or was it pretty much the same?
Well, it was kind of a blank going up the hill look, but when he stopped, he definitely changed facial expressions when he looked over and sniffed the air near me. He definitely noticed the scent of me, and it kind of changed, like I said, to more of, what is that? And that was about it. I mean, his face was blank going up the hill. I mean, his eyes were straight forward. But he did offer the attention towards me. Definitely saw him looking at me and kind of having kind of a cringe on his face almost. Almost like when an animal's about to hiss and it doesn't. Kind of like yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens next? You run down to the car. You're throwing up.
Yep.
Do you tell anyone about your encounter?
I wanted to so bad, but, in the situation that I was in, in the state of mind I would have been hysterical, which I was, but in a different sense, not, like hysterical, but like the throwing up thing. And, instead of me making an issue like I did there and, getting the ridicule that I would get, I just told him, you know what, I drank too much the night before, but my cousins who were up there too said I was white as a ghost. And I'm not a tan person, but I'm not white either. And they said I was as white as a wall. I mean, and I had a look on my face and I wasn't myself, and they knew something was wrong, and they said, "What'd you see, a bear?" And I said, "Oh, no, I didn't see a bear. I'm just not feeling good." And a part of me wanted to say something, but I mean, the ridicule, I couldn't, at the moment, I couldn't take it. I had too much mentally going on at the moment. There was no way. I asked, the only thing I did was ask my buddy. I said, "Hey, what was that sound?" And he says, "Oh, that's a fox." And I knew he was wrong because it's too much of a coincidence of the timing. And like I said, I just couldn't tell anybody. It's just, it was, and I kind of wish I did now, but I don't at the same time. But no, I couldn't tell anybody, Wes. There was no way. There was no way I could possibly tell anybody.
Yeah, most people don't get that close. Most people don't have that close of an encounter like you had, and to be able to see the nostrils, being pink like bubblegum. That's an interesting point. When we're in these high intense situations, one thing I've noticed when I talk to a lot of witnesses is, especially when they get really close, they'll usually focus on something. Like the guy I had on, the hunter that shot one, his focus was the nostrils. He's like, he could give descriptions on more than anything else. He could tell me everything about the nostrils. And that makes sense. When you go into like this tunnel vision, when you're in this high intense situations, and you tend to focus on maybe something that seems more normal in such an unnormal situation,
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And the whole situation obviously was not normal for me. And like I said, I was focusing on that. And then the torso, like I said, that I don't usually look at males' chests, but when you see this one, it was the nostrils and definitely the torso and the build of this thing. But yeah, the nostrils, because of the coloring of it, is where my tunnel vision, like you said, went right to it, to know this isn't a good situation. It ended up turning out fine, but it wasn't a bear I was coming across. That's how I identified it, basically. And then the fact that it's walking effortlessly on two legs, which bears wobble around on two legs. So, there was a big difference there.
The other question I wanted to ask you, I've never asked this question before, and the few people that I've actually seen the male sexual parts of these things, and I may cut this out of the show, but was it a larger unit or was it a smaller unit?
Oh, he was hung like an ox. Let's just say that. I mean, it was definitely there to see, and he would definitely, I guess, in a shower, people would be in awe about that. I wasn't in awe at the moment, but you definitely knew it was a male. And it was quite large, yes.
Yeah, and I don't know why I asked that question.
That's all right. It's a big question. How big is big,
Yeah.
Big feet mean big,
I asked another witness off the air one time. She actually saw it. She was, unfortunately, face to face with it. She was in her car, and the thing was standing up, and she looked over, and that's what she saw.
Oh.
And and kind of like the nostril thing, she just was going on and on about it.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of curious. When the creature walked off, did it vocalize? Did it snort? Did it grunt? Did it do anything? Or did it just turn and walk off?
It basically just kept walking like I never was there. Like, almost like I was nothing to him more than, just a creature sitting there, and that he was not interested in what I had. And like we talked about, maybe it was because I was making eye contact and there was no threat. But the only thing noise he made was when he huffed, when he was coming up, and he was halfway up the hill. It was like one breath, but it was definitely loud enough where you could hear it, and and there was no bear, like a bear will grunt. This thing just walked, and once it got to the top, it just walked right over the top of the hill, and unfortunately I didn't follow it because I was in a state of shock where I just literally sat there and looked forward. And I was afraid to look forward at first because I didn't know if this thing was, but I knew that if this thing was going to get me, it was going to get me. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't run, and I didn't want to run because I didn't want to put a threat towards it or, make it any uncomfortable. I think it may have been, okay, if you just stay there, I'm not going to worry about you today, and that's why I wonder if these creatures, they have personalities, and like humans do, where they're more intelligent than people really give them credit for. And, maybe they know how people are, maybe they know, compared to a guy that's like, oh, I'm hunting Bigfoot. They might know that. And that's where, maybe sometimes they get aggressive, or if, like I heard on your show not too long ago, there was a camper that said that his wife was out of the car and the thing was standing there kind of crouched over, and he basically gave him a warning sign to get out of there. And that's why this thing didn't attack, maybe. And maybe that guy that shot the one, maybe that was just one of those out of the blue ones where, this thing was threatened. They just feel threatened. Some people there could be a schizophrenic one out there. That's the thing. I don't know why this thing didn't pay any attention to me. Thank God it didn't. It knew I was there, but it didn't cause a threat to me in any way. I didn't feel like it anyway, and it never. And like I said, if it wanted to, it could have destroyed me. Could have ended me quickly.
Yeah, and I think with these things, like anything else, I think they do have personalities, and I think you do come across ones that are godless killing machines, and then you might come across ones like you did, where it's just it doesn't really want to mess with you. It doesn't want to deal with you. It's not going to growl at you. It's just going to move along, and hopefully you'll move along. And and that's the encounter you really want to have. You don't want it. I think if it was going to give you any sort of hassle, like you and I talked about, when it made eye contact with you, it would have growled, it would have thrown a tantrum, it would have, and so to have it just walk off. Have you been back? Or go ahead.
Oh yeah, I've been. That's where I hunt again. It took me a year to get back there, and I did. And like I said, I've smelled that smell again, but I've never had contact or seen it again. And like I said, I have a complete different thought than a lot of people do on them, that they're dangerous creatures, and they can be, but I wouldn't just shoot one just because it's there. You know what I mean? Like if it posed a threat and I had the state of mind to do it, I'd probably protect myself. However, I'm not just going to go and shoot one when it's not offering a threat to me at all. You know what I mean? But the best, I can understand when they get, there's angry ones where they'll come right at you and they'll kill you. There's been plenty, like you said, the trapper story. And I think they get irritated when people are in their territory, and I don't think this was his territory. I think he was passing through, and that's my true belief, because otherwise the behavior that I can, you know a heck of a lot more than I do about it, but it didn't have any intention on killing me, else it would have. And who knows, even if it did charge me, if I would have been able to get the state of mind or not, probably not. So, and it like I said, it didn't pose any type of threat at me at all, but it was scary as hell to look at. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, at any moment they could turn, and I knew that, but he did not even, give me a second look to attack or anything like that.
That's interesting. So you've been back and you've actually smelled the smell again.
Absolutely. I've smelled it. But it wasn't as strong this time. It's more of a distant, and that's why I wonder if he, it's been, 2-3 years. I think it's been 3 years, and maybe he knows I'm there. Maybe he, knows my scent, or maybe it's my mind playing tricks on me. It could be anything. And I can't, until I see it again, I don't know exactly what that is, but it's very similar to the same thing I smelled. And I don't know, can I ask you something really quick?
Sure.
Is there a lot of sightings in Michigan? I mean, this is why I was kind of iffy to come out with it, but is there a lot of sightings? And I know North America, Northern California and stuff like that have the encounters, but I mean, is there a lot from Michigan?
Yeah, there actually is. I actually do get a lot of reports out of Michigan, believe it or not. Actually, a lot. And, not only Sasquatch, but I also get a lot of Dogman reports out of that area.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is that, I mean, do they change color per different, and sorry, I hate to be asking you questions now, but like, are they different colors in different regions and, stuff like that? That was always what I was curious, if they're black in Michigan and they're red in California, or brown or gray. I mean, there's been sightings of gray ones, I guess, too, correct? And that's what I'm always curious of, is why was this thing black and the other ones are different colors? But at the time, I didn't really worry about what color it was. I just knew what I was looking at.
Yeah, no, and that's a fair question. To be honest with you, I think color's kind of irrelevant. Sometimes You'll hear people say, well, the red ones are the mean ones, or the And I think that's kind of irrelevant. I think like any other animal, one mean black dog doesn't mean all black dogs are mean.
Yeah.
But I would say even in Michigan, I get reports mainly of Auburn, but I do get black, and I do get occasionally gray ones. But you'll find that universal all over the United States, so it's not just pinned down to one area, as far as color.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I figured as much, but I thought I'd ask. I mean, it's a fair question, like you said. I don't know much about it, and this one encounter before that, I didn't really pay any attention to it. I didn't. I just couldn't. I didn't have any. I thought possibly they could be real, but once you see them, there's, like I told you earlier, also, you start thinking, okay, aliens aren't real. Well, I didn't think this was real either until I see it. Anything's possible in my opinion now. I mean, anything is possible now. I mean, and I even figured out how scared you can possibly be, and I thought I could never be more scared than I've been before until that moment where the fear literally paralyzed me, crippled me. Literally I couldn't move.
Yeah, and I think the fear is and a lot of people might, that haven't had encounters look at that and go, well, why were you afraid? It didn't do anything to you. But, when you see something that isn't supposed to exist, people don't understand the size of these things. Like you and I talked about, it really does redefine the word giant when you see one.
Yep. Because I've been up close to Shaquille O'Neal at a Pistons game once, and I didn't think anything can get bigger than that. But you're talking 2 feet taller. I mean, 2 feet taller than Shaquille O'Neal is what I seen. And that really puts it into perspective. Anybody who's been up next to Yao Ming or Shaquille O'Neal know how big 7 feet is. And when you add 2 more feet to that, that gives you, like you said, the word giant. I would say so.
Not only their height, but then when you start looking at the build of these things, like you mentioned the arms.
The build on it was just, the build on it, you can't explain it until you see it. I mean, you can try to explain to people all day, it was huge. But until you see it, you don't understand how big this thing is. I mean, the fear that goes through you because of alone how big this thing is.
Yeah. Now, seeing is believing, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate you coming on, Zach, and sharing the encounter. It's one of those things to where, as you and I talked earlier, everyone always wants to hear from police officers, but I would rather hear from, I like to hear from everyone, but I love to hear hunters talk because hunters are in the moment, they're armed, and they know what they're looking for, and when they see something, you wouldn't have had the same reaction if it was a black bear.
No. I would have had my shotgun aimed right at it every step it took. And I've been there where I literally would have had it aimed right on him and followed him and probably walked towards him to get him to shoo off. But this thing, there was no way in the world was I moving. And there was no, you know what I mean? Like you said, it seems something that's not supposed to exist. And that's shock inside of the size and the, the height and the stories you hear of what they do. I mean, that's and how you don't know which one you're encountering. Are you encountering an angry one? Are you encountering one that just kind of wants to get out of there? But this one more was just, I own the land. He basically was saying to me with his eyes, look, I own this. You're not going to try anything. I'm just keep going. I'm not even going to worry about you. Because if he wanted to, he could have, like I said, he could have snapped me in half. Easily, probably with one arm, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah. No, and like I said, even in my own encounter, when I said, hey, I think it could have flipped the car over, and when you see one, you realize what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I don't know enough about it really to be asking, but if I do, I can put a shout there that if one's not, like in my case, if it's posing a threat to you, don't pull out a gun and shoot it. Because there's 2 reasons for that. 1, you miss him, he's threatened, and he's going to maul you apart. 2, you shoot him for what reason? What reason did you shoot him for? Out of fear, I can understand self-defense, but don't make a situation when there isn't one, and I luckily had one where there was no situation. That's basically all I'm going to say to people out there is don't jump to conclusions unless you have to, and it might be too late, but at that point, if it's too late, it's too late.
Yeah.
You're not going to get out of that.
No, I hear you. Well, thank you, Zach. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely, sir. You have yourself a good night.
And again, hang out with Mark and I tomorrow night. We'll be going over the Miller document. And if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email, wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.